Sure.
Rob, awesome to have you on this podcast. I appreciate you not just finding me, but also reaching out and now willing to share your story, which is incredibly deep. I was doing a workout this morning and I was like, you know what? You might be someone that I have on multiple times because there's just so many layers to this where we have the mental health approach, we have the ketamine treatments, we have toxic bosses at work cultures, what makes a good leader. There's so many different variables here. And I kind of want to dive into like each of them, but that would lead to like an all day conversation. So I almost feel like at some point we'll have you back on and we'll dive into different topics because you are now an expert in so many different areas. You actually now gave a TED talk, which is pretty sweet. Maybe one of these days I'll be able to do that as well. That's freaking awesome. But yeah, I'll let you say hello to the audience in just a moment. But I want to share that you found me on my recent podcast with Sonny Strasberg because you work with her.
Hmm.
And she's the psychedelic therapist, which I was just blown away by. And so, yeah, I really genuinely appreciate you listening and reaching out. So, Rob, welcome to the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Yeah. I met Sunny, it would have been about 14 months ago.
Hmm.
And I went to a retreat that she was hosting with Dr. Richard Schwartz at 1440, and it's like in Santa Cruz. It's just outside of San Francisco
Okay.
in the redwoods. And yeah, she's amazing. And I'm actually seeing her for some ketamine next week.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, she did a retreat down here in Costa Rica as well that we went to in April, and it was amazing. And I mean, so I said down here, I suppose, for the listeners out there. So I'm Canadian. My wife and I and our dog Winston, we moved down to Costa Rica in April of 2023, and it's
Mhm.
part of my healing journey. But it's been absolutely amazing.
That's awesome. I hear great things about Costa Rica. My wife actually did an internship there, or she studied abroad there, I should say.
Yeah.
She loved it. She's trying to get me to go. She shouldn't have to try too hard. So at some point we'll make it down there. How did you get linked up with Sunny?
Yeah. So like I've suffered from depression for since about 2012,
Hmm.
and I spent the first few years like having very invalidating experiences with therapists, and then also trying a bunch of regular psychotropic medicines like whatever prescription meds, and actually having very adverse effects from most of them. It was probably about, I don't know, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 with my first psychiatrist.
Hmm.
And they all made me worse. And it eventually led to a suicide attempt in 2013. Um, After that, I did a few more therapy sessions. I did some more meds. And then ultimately, I felt like nothing was really helping me. And so, like, my last therapy session, the guy said to me, he's like, Rob, you just have to move and get another job. And I was like, bro, like I literally walked in on session one saying, I know I need to move and get another job, but I need your help to manage this stuff.
Hmm.
And I was like, why are we coming around to like I already knew this.
Yeah.
Ultimately that wasn't the answer, but that's another story. Um, but but yeah, so I struggled with that for a long time. I disassociated for about 6 years where I just floated through life, not really trying too hard or pushing too much. It was very much like, oh, I got to be in defense mode because otherwise the world's going to hurt me.
Hmm.
Um, and then 2019, I hired a coach, started a podcast, like trying to get out of corporate engineering where I had all these bad bosses, which you talked about. Um, and then that opened up emotional intelligence, which was very traumatic, obviously, for someone who had a suicide attempt. And that put me back into therapy. And the great part actually was a friend of mine from MIT. He also became a therapist, and he was like, "Rob, you got to figure out this IFS stuff is really good.
What's
In
IFS? What's
terms of
that? What's that stand for? Okay. Okay.
it's really good. You should Yep, internal family systems.
Okay.
And it's what Sunny practices for the majority of her work. And he was like, you need to find a therapist who does this. So I Googled it on Psychology Today. I found I guess, my current therapist. Um, and that was what she does. And so that started the therapy journey. I was doing IFS, um, and it was really helping me a lot. And
Hmm.
a friend of mine, David Drapkin from Psychedelics Today, had Dr. Richard Schwartz, who invented IFS, on his podcast because they were working together with the Vital program that they run.
Mm.
And I was like, Dave, can you introduce me to to Dick? Because I wanted to have him on the show. And then he came on the show. And then after the show was over, he was like, I really liked you. Like, we're doing this retreat in December, like last year. Or sorry, 2022. Um, and obviously I was like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. I better go. So
Right.
I went and I met Dick, and then I met Sonny, and that was really when I was introduced to her, like therapy with her, May or June of
Okay.
2023. So long story short, yeah, it's been a while.
Can you say that was like one of the moments that turned your life around was meeting her and started working with her?
Not really, actually.
Okay.
She's been very helpful. I'm not saying she's not. She's amazing and not helpful. Sorry, she's amazing and very helpful. The big moments actually were basically the pieces of finding my first therapist, the
Mm.
one that did IFS. She also does EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprogramming, which is the leading, right now at least, it's their leading trauma therapy in the world. For they do use it for veterans, um, PTSD, first
Mm.
responders, but it's also good for folks who either had significant or not significant, but childhood experiences, trauma,
Hmm.
whatever. It's very good. Um, the other side of it was also finding my current psychiatrist who does the ketamine treatment, at least that I was doing in Canada.
Mm.
And so I met him June of 2021. Sorry. Yes, June of 2021. And when I was walking into his office for the first time, he had me fill out those standard, like, how depressed are you? How anxious are you? And for the depressive inventory for Bex, I was 51 out of 63. So like basically
Wow.
suicidal, like to a very high level. And it was not that long later, 2 or 3 months later, after getting ketamine treatment, and then he actually ran a genetic test and prescribed me medications that were working for my genotype.
Hmm.
Um, it was like literally like a flash in the pan, and it was like 2 months later, I was like 20 or something on that scale. Like I was like moderate, and then I still work with him. I still do meds and stuff, and it's like now I wouldn't even say I'm really depressed at all. I still take meds every day,
Hmm.
and I still do therapy and all this stuff. But it's like where I am today versus where I was is night and day.
How did you view life before and how do you view life now? What is the difference for the people that don't really understand or can't visualize what that light switch looks like to you?
Yeah, it's not a light switch; it's a journey.
Hmm.
And so for me, what I experienced with my bad boss, and also what I experienced in childhood, had a belief about myself where I am not accepted for who I am. And it's very common. I work a lot now with folks with mindset problems. I don't do therapy, but I
Hmm.
work a lot with folks who have mindset. And basically, we have, like most people, have 2 or 3 beliefs that are very core to what they've experienced through life. Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not accepted, I don't belong, I'm powerless, I'm not worthy, like stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had my strongest one was I'm not accepted. There were some elements of like I'm not seen or I'm not heard kind of stuff too.
Hmm.
And that was when I had my toxic boss was like that's why it was so traumatic to me was like I had built my entire life to be seen and recognized and accepted through performance. And so in school, get A's, your teacher
Hmm.
goes, "Wow, you're wonderful." Your parents go, "Wow, you're wonderful." In sports, you work really hard, you score goals, you play well, your coach goes, "Yeah, you're wonderful." Your teammates go, "Yeah, you're wonderful. We want you on the team." And that led me to high levels of performance. Like I was on the junior national water polo team. I won a natty. Um, I went to MIT. I got a mechanical engineering degree at like the, one of the top programs in the world. And then when I went to work, that same level of performance actually got me a lot of pushback because folks didn't want to change. There was lots of the ego, and it was like after I don't know a year, a bit more than a year working there, I felt like they didn't want me.
Mm.
It wasn't like it was like yeah, my work they didn't want, but it was like ultimately it was like that was a reflection on me, and I felt powerless to affect change on that level. And so it was basically landed in this element of despair. I'm powerless to change my situation. And if they don't want me, then then what?
Mm.
I talk about it's not the suicide attempt. It's the next morning. I woke up. I knew my job was killing me, but I got dressed and I went to work. I didn't quit. I didn't move to the beach. I didn't, I had the ability to literally just be like, yep, I'm not coming into work. And I could have like moved to go back to live with my parents. Like this was not like this unachievable thing. But it's like your brain, you must work and you must achieve at work because this is who you are.
Hmm.
And that's why you go to work. And now, obviously, I'm a leadership coach. I've moved to Costa Rica. I got married. I got a dog. I did a TED talk. Like all of that was not to try to get me acceptance and self worth. That's
Hmm.
from a place of like, no, that's pretty fun. Or like,
Right.
like I've always wanted to live somewhere tropical, but it was like, it's never been a thing because it's like, well, you got to work a job, you got to live in Canada or USA, you got to be blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, you know what? After COVID hit and we went remote, it was like, we could actually do this.
That's
And then
awesome.
it took a little while, but then we did it.
So I'm writing down notes as you're talking. Correct me if I'm wrong. It just seems like you were taught to be more result driven and to live up to perhaps other people's expectations. And that was tied to your identity. So when you weren't, let's say, getting the results or the praise from your managers or management, your identity was basically taking a massive hit, which pretty much led you into depression. Is that correct?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm not like, I'm not alone in this. Like
No, no,
Tony,
for sure.
we talked about his pod from the few, yeah, he had the same experience basically, right?
Mm.
Is like he was the CEO, he was the like high powered guy, but then he felt like, what's going on?
Mm.
And I coach an Olympic gold medalist, and I asked her, I was like, I was a joke, but I was said like, how long did the medal last? And
Mm.
she's like, no, I was standing on the podium, and I was like, what do I do now? Like, who am I now? And that's such a common, basically all my clients have some version of this. Obviously
Mm.
it's not always like Olympic gold medalist or CEO, but it's like they did their goal, and then now it's like, well, am I enough? Like, what else do I have to do to prove to myself that I'm enough? And so ultimately, this externally validated mindset, it always ends up in eventually you will hit a wall. It may not be like I hit it when I was, 23. Tony hit it much later. Some of my clients, they're like 60 and they're like hitting it then, right?
Hmm.
But it's always going to end up in hitting a wall at some point, because nothing will ever be perfect where you just, win
Hmm.
forever and nothing ever bad happens to you.
What is the solution when someone comes to you like the Olympian that says, I achieved my goal, right? I got a gold medal. That is basically what they trained their life for, and they achieved it. They got it. What is the solution after that? Is it to find another journey, to find another passion and follow that path? I'm genuinely curious what you tell your clients once they achieved the pinnacle of all achievements. What do you do then?
It's not about achievement. That's the trap, right?
Mm,
Buddhism has a tenet which is about life is suffering. And the direct translation is more around life is thirst.
mm,
And the thirst is for the next thing, the new iPhone, the next promotion, the, you know, climb a bigger mountain, go to outer space, go to Mars, go to the next like that
mhm,
next thing, to prove to yourself that you are acceptable or good enough or loved or powerful, whatever those beliefs you have about yourself.
mm,
But in Buddhism, how they approach it is like, if I can train my mind, I can let go of desire. I'm not saying that's the answer. It's not the answer, right? Like, it's
mhm,
just like Tony said, like, we're not about not success, but it's what he had in his transformation, right? Which is like,
mhm,
he left his job of, this is what you should be, or society says this makes you happy. And it's like, now I do something different that's
mhm,
more in line of who I am and my purpose and my impact. And now I'm even more successful. Like he says that on the show,
mhm,
right? And for me, it was like, I left corporate engineering, which I was making, I was making six figures. I had paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. Like, my parents thought it was good, right?
mhm,
But I hated it.
mhm.
And it's like, now it's much more entrepreneurial, right? Like, there's no steady paycheck. It's like, you land clients, you do jobs, money comes in. Sometimes it doesn't. That's life. But I'm free. I can move to Costa Rica. I can do a TED talk. I can do these things that I want to do
Mhm.
because that's who I am. But it's also, I'm impacting thousands of people now versus when I was an engineer. I mean, I suppose my work was doing stuff, but like, you don't really see that.
Now, when you were an engineer, when you were at this job, did you have a voice in the back of your mind saying, I'm meant for something else? Like I could do something else. I shouldn't be here. I should. Because I imagine there's a lot of people that go to work a 9 to 5 in their office that they freaking hate it. They're just there to collect a paycheck, kind of like what you were doing. And they knew their calling was something else. Did you have a voice in the back of your head like, I should be doing something else?
This is where the internal family systems, the parts work comes into play, right? Is people have many voices in their minds,
Mm,
right? There's people that are like, hey, you better do more. Hey, you better move to the beach. Hey, that promotion's for you. Hey, maybe I would feel better if I ran in my own surf company, right?
mm,
Whatever that is. But it's one is starting to tune into those voices and realize that, yeah, you're not crazy. Everybody has lots of those voices,
right.
right? That's the first thing. The other side of it is starting to deeply understand what are those parts that you have that are designed to protect you from pain versus who you truly are,
Mm,
right? And the ones that protected me from pain were the ones that were like, Rob, you work harder, you get results, this is who you are. Because if you get results, people will like you and accept you. And it doesn't matter about you. Work yourself to burn out. I don't care. You work harder and then you do it.
Mm.
And even the suicidal part, like this is the part that a lot of folks don't understand, is the suicidal part, or if you, suffer from addiction, that part's trying to help you. It's not, yes, my suicidal part's trying to kill me, but it's trying to actually help me from experiencing pain that
All
it
right.
thinks is going to last forever.
Mm.
And once you lean into that with love and compassion and allow it to realize that you validate it for it trying to help you, that's when it can relax and let go.
Mm.
And that's really the secret, is we're often taught to like stuff it down and like push through. But it's like, or like with the addictive parts, like a lot of some other programs, they're like, well, you just reframe it and basically tell it it's wrong.
Mm.
And it's like, because it's illogical. Well, yeah, I mean, of course it's illogical, but it's like, that's not telling it it's wrong is not the answer. It's like a kid. It's like, it has a perspective. Often it's very young, and it's like leaning into it with like basically your mom or dad hat on and
Mm.
going like, tell me about, yeah, I love you. I totally understand why you're coming for me that way. Now, what happens if we just change your perspective a bit?
Mm. And it's funny you just said mom and dad, because a question that I have, and I was going to ask you probably about right now, um,
Yeah.
that I consider to be very important. I've listened to some of your episodes, and I know how you talk about how like the vast majority of like what you feel, the emotions you feel on a daily basis today are formed, I believe you said between the ages of like 0 and 7, correct?
Yes.
Knowing that I'm going to be a father, this is very important to me. If you were to give me advice about perhaps advice to give my son or ways to speak to him, um, just ways to parent him properly, or if you can go back in time, how would you advise me to do that properly to ensure as much as possible that my son is happier, not so results driven, but perhaps enjoying the process and the journey and not just trying to achieve all the time?
Yeah. So, Ryan, there's no perfect answer to this question. Like literally, you could get two psychologists who have a baby and their kid will still have trauma. That's not even a question. That's just fact.
Mhm.
Now, again, right? I always speak to trauma being on a spectrum from basically 1 to 100 because I don't think anyone's a zero,
Mhm.
right? So, of course, they wouldn't be 100 because 100 would be like very dark and big things, right?
Mhm.
But they would have
Mhm.
some. The big thing, Peter Levine, who's an expert on trauma, he says basically that like trauma is a hard experience without an empathetic witness. So what that means is, and this is true in a sense, that some of the deeper work that you can do with yourself is like going back and visualizing yourself in these moments where you feel pain, and then you, as you are today, going and being your empathetic witness to that child that was hurt in your past. That's a big thing.
Mhm.
So when your kid falls and hurts their knee, or like, they fall off their bike, or someone at school calls them stupid or whatever. Like though, when those things happen, it's like leaning into your kid with empathy and making sure that they experience that.
Mhm.
There is stuff that you just won't be able to control, right? Is like they go to school, the teacher says something, maybe you never hear of it. Like these are things that just happen. The other
Right.
thing to just realize is they're a kid. And so imagine you're 5 years old, like literally something that you do as a parent that, like, I always use this example is like, what happens if you saw, you were a kid, like you're 5 years old, and your older brother or older sister who was, I don't know, 10, they got an A on their math test, and your mom said, "Hey, I'm really proud of you and for getting an A," and hugged them. Like, absolutely a completely reasonable and actually probably a good thing to do if you're a mom,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, we're not
Mm-hmm.
saying like this is a anything, but you could have had that belief form in the moment is like, my mom will be proud and love me if I do achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's not that the mom did anything wrong. It's not that the son or daughter, like older brother or sister, did anything wrong. Anything. It's just like, you're a child interpreting the world through child's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one is you need to give yourself grace as a dad. The other thing is just, yeah, it's just opening up the conversations around emotions, and then also just being very empathetic to your kid. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them on everything. Also, empathy is not sympathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like, I get a lot of leaders that ask me not about their kids, but like about like their staff. Like, how do I hold my staff? How do I be empathetic but also hold them to results? Right? Because you don't want your kid being like, "Oh, this means I can just like do nothing at school," right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like they're two different things. And so you can be empathetic, but you can also care about them enough to hold them accountable to doing well in school.
Mm.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I just reread the book, The Four Agreements, if you're familiar with that. And one of the agreements is always try your best. And I think that's just something we hear all the time. But if you take a second and just think about it, like, are you always trying your best? And that's something that I kind of want to pass down to my son is just try your best. We can celebrate that no matter what the result is. And the results will come at some point if you're always trying your best. Um, I'm curious, looking back when you were young, what was the thing, or perhaps some things that happened between the age of 0 and 7 that kind of perhaps instilled these results driven lifestyle of you that in turn led you down kind of like a scary path, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was my dad was interested in different things than I was.
Mm,
And so it's not good or bad, it just was. And
mm,
so at school, like a lot of the boys, I guess, my friends were into hockey and sports, and my dad was not into that. And so I was doing a lot of those things, and my dad was not interested in doing those things. And so that led me to feeling like he didn't accept me at home.
mm,
And then once I started getting into sports, and like I had coaches who were like adult men, right? And they were basically like quasi playing the role of dad, right? Is like, if I work hard in the pool, then my coach says, "Hey, Rob, good job," or like, "Keep up the great work," or like those things. And that just reinforces that element. And then the other side was like, in the academic side of it, it was like my parents were very obsessed about school.
mm.
And so it was like, you have to get good grades all the time. And it was like, if you got a B, it was like a massive disaster. Um, and
Wow.
so it was like, that was very much both of their focus. My mom and my dad was like, you got to do well in school so you can get into a good college. So then you can get the great job with a white picket fence and a wife and, 1.5 kids and a dog. Right.
Mm,
But then it's like, you have that moment, which I did when I was a lot younger, but it's like, you have that job and you're like, yeah, but I like, the whole world lied to me. Like, this is supposed to be happiness.
mm,
And like, but yet I want to kill myself. And you're like, even, it was even funny, like maybe about 6 months ago, I was in ketamine, and I was like, it's very ironic that like I didn't take drugs because I was playing sports, right? So I didn't do drugs until I was like 30, 2001 or something. Like when they made cannabis legal in Canada, I did it like a
Mm.
couple times and whatever. But I was like, it's kind of ironic that like you quote unquote do all the right things, and then you're 35 sitting in a chair doing ketamine because you hate yourself, and it just is like this funny thing that you're like, yeah, like a lot of the things that we teach our kids or we learn as kids is like it's not actually how the world works.
Mm. I want to dive into ketamine therapy in just a moment.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, when you were that young, and it seems like you had a ton of pressure on you from your parents to just continuously achieve. Did you realize the pressure in the moment, or is this something that you were just happy, you worked hard, and you were happy to achieve the results they wanted, and you look back and you're like, God damn, I was under so much pressure? Or was that something you just felt every day?
I didn't feel it. And this is the
No.
part, right? Is like um and you would, since you've listened to this show, right, is basically our mindset. I like to describe it as the operating system. And as you know, it's formed with a bunch of rules that make you keep going. In our mindset, it's beliefs, but basically, those rules or beliefs kind of govern how you see the world. And luckily, I was born in 1988, so I can say I'm running Windows 1995. But now, you know, I'm 35, I got a job. Well, I'm quasi entrepreneur. Like I live in Costa Rica, I'm married, I got a dog, like I have 2024 hardware,
Mm.
but I'm running Windows 95. And it's like, it makes sense that some of those rules don't work for your current responsibilities.
Mm.
And so that's where it's like strategically looking at yourself. And this is the part, right? Is like 95 to 97% of the decisions you make every day are subconscious. You don't realize you make these decisions. That's what it is. And they come from that operating system. Like when you hit the button, the on button of your computer, it does stuff. And then you get a screen that says, like, now you can do your stuff, right? The
Mm.
same stuff, right? Is like you wake up in the morning, you put your pants on, you don't really think about which leg first or whatever. If you play sports, like you probably, it looks like you play baseball, right? It's like you're not thinking on a swing like, well, I gotta like move my arm in a certain
Right.
way, and
Right.
like, and then when I run, I have to, left foot first, and then right foot, and I'll push your toes, right? It's like it just happens,
Mm.
and it's like when you've driven to work or you've driven to the store, and you're like, shit, how did I get here,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so those decisions are coming from beliefs that you were basically a kid, like 0 to 7, and they're impacting you today.
Mm.
And so for me, when it was like, I'm not accepted, it was like, well, I learned that, like, hey, I can be accepted if I do stuff and I get results. And so, like, when I was doing well in school, it was like, I felt good because, like, I was getting basically the affirmation and the validation of, like, you're working, like, you're getting an A. Great. Your mom likes that. Your dad likes that. Your teachers like that. Right. And then in sports, it was like, hey, you're doing well. You're scoring goals. You're playing well. Your coaches like that. Your teammates like that. And then that's how it sort of reinforces that behavior. And
Mm.
so this is where one is bringing that stuff to your awareness, and you're not going to be able to distinguish right now, like, hey, I'm not good enough. But we always talk about is the emotions are the windows to the beliefs.
Mm.
And so when you feel those frustration or anxiety or fear or avoidance, start to question, like, what does that mean? Why do I feel this way? And then start to go deeper, is like, what's the belief about myself? So it's an I am or I am not statement, basically,
Mm.
that would make me feel this way in this moment. So it's like, and this plays out into your regular life, right? Like, hey, I'm running a business. Like, should I send a proposal to somebody to like try to get coaching gig, or like try to sell them a program. And if your brain's like, well, Rob, they don't like you, or like they don't accept you, you don't have that necessarily that thought, but some folks just don't send the proposal. Like I literally work with an entrepreneur, and she had a client say, hey, send me a proposal. I will pay you. And she didn't do it for 2 months because she
Mm.
had that mindset of like, basically was like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy.
The
And
imposter
it's like,
syndrome.
we
Yeah.
worked on it. Now she sent it. But yeah,
Mm.
it's everywhere.
It really is. And if you don't mind me asking, I'm genuinely curious. If your parents are still alive, do you have a relationship with them? Have
Yep.
you had a conversation with them about any of this? Like, what does your relationship look like with them today?
Yeah, they're still alive. I was visiting them in, I don't know, September or whatever. They're coming down to Costa Rica in a month or so. Yeah. Um, they know I struggle with mental health. I haven't talked to my dad about this stuff because he's kind of an old school, doesn't
Mm.
believe in mental health kind of person. Um, Again, it's not his fault because his
Mm.
dad was literally in World War II, and there was a lot of, I'm sure there's trauma, like there's trauma there,
Yeah, yeah.
and his, like my grandfather never dealt with it, and it was passed along to my dad, and it's passed along to me. And so ultimately, like for you as a dad, it's like the true advice is like do your own therapy and do your own healing, and like do your own mindset work, because that's the best way to make sure that your kid is going to feel the best way they're going to feel.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, my last episode with Emily Sanders, who was a therapist, about dealing with guilt and shame, was about like how does this stop with me, and make sure I'm not passing this on to my child. That granted, like I'm going to be the best filter as possible, but you can't, like you said, you can't filter everything. It can't be over my son 24/7. I'm going to have to send him away to school and some other places. I just can't keep tabs and everything. But I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to do the best that I possibly can, and I'll be documenting my journey along the way. Um, just to continue on your journey a little bit before we get to the ketamine treatment, like, so I want to be clear for the people listening to this. You graduated at MIT. You're obviously brilliant. Um, the sharpest tools go there, if you will, sharpest tool or sharpest pencils in the box. Um, So you graduate from there, you're brilliant, you get a good job, and you start finding solutions. It kind of sounds like you created some ripples in the water by you finding alternate solutions, and perhaps solutions better than other people were finding them, which probably led to envy. But what are your thoughts for people tying so much of their happiness or self-worth to their job?
Again, it's not their fault, right? Like I was that,
Yeah, a lot of us are, for sure.
but it was also the reason why. Yeah, and it was also like the reason why my boss was a bad boss,
Mm.
was he had his identity wrapped up around his job, and he couldn't allow this new engineer to save the company tens of millions of dollars because he looked bad, because, well, in his mind he
Mm.
looked bad, right? In reality he would actually look good because, right, he would be the person who hired the person who did these things, and like it's not his job to do this, right? He's the manager, right? He was
Mm.
running 100 people. Like he should have, like he should want his team to do these things, right? But because of his mindset, which was, basically similar, which is like my job's my identity, I have to be right, I have to be smart, I have to be, he wouldn't allow that stuff to basically leave the office
Mm.
or leave anything other than like where it was. And so it's like I work with leaders now, like that's my job. And it's like the reason we do so much work with mindset is that's the true unlock.
Mm.
And it's not just me, like Harvard Business Review reports that companies spend $356 billion a year on leadership development, and only 25% works because only 25% addresses the mindset. And it's the same, like I did a TED talk in June, and it was like there's 6 types of destructive leaders, as the research calls it. 65.1% of the folks listening to this podcast right now have a bad boss. Of course, there are many different forms, but all of the bad boss behavior is mindset. It's not their fault. It's like what they've learned through their childhood. And it's like if they don't do the deeper work, that's what leads them to be the various forms of bad bosses. But it's all fixable. And that's the biggest thing, is being courageous enough to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I don't have it all figured out, but I'm willing to try. And I'm willing to go on this journey to learn more about my own experience. And basically, I'm willing to risk my identity to get everything I could possibly dream of. And it's not common that folks do this voluntarily. Like, I would be dead if I didn't do it. I was forced to do it. But now I sit on the other side and I go, holy shit. Like, my life is so incredible beyond what I could have imagined.
Super happy to hear that. I want you back on at some point to talk about leadership and these toxic bosses, because no doubt in my mind, people are listening to this be like, my boss sucks. How do I deal with this? My life is miserable because of this. Do I quit my job? I feel like that would be that's a whole episode in itself. And I know we got to get to like ketamine treatments and stuff like that. So I want you back on to talk about that, because I know you run your own podcast with you're a leadership coach and the Leadership Launchpad Project. I do want to talk about that
Yeah. Just before we
briefly.
jump forward.
Yeah.
So I did do a TED talk on how to deal with an asshole boss. It's not yet up on YouTube, but
Okay.
if folks want to go to howtodealboss.com, I have a free ebook there. And
That's
then I
awesome.
also have it's like a mini course. And if you get the ebook, there's a $50 coupon in there for the program. So like the program's like $200.
Awesome.
But yeah, it'll teach you that stuff, or you can just send me an email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Go
come
ahead.
back on. We'll dive deeper in this. I also want to say it's funny. A year ago, literally a year ago, I was at a company, overworked, completely burned out. I take a lot of pride in producing results, like you. Um, Not very often did I have a job where I just like, I think I'm going to quit without even having anything lined up because I was that miserable. It was really a drain on my energy. It was a drain on my new marriage. It was like I was getting messages at night to hop back on and help with stuff. There was no respect of time, no value on mental health and recharging your batteries and what that looks like. And yeah, it was miserable. I can say that with a smile on my face because I found a job that values mental health, time off, recharging, resetting your batteries, setting boundaries. It's funny that I actually have a book, right? It's right here. It's called Time Off, about how time off we're required to read this in the onboarding process about how that can actually produce better results than just grinding 24/7, just burnout. But I say all this because I mean I found this opportunity with a company I love. I chased it, I went after it, but ultimately I had to leave the position I was in. How often do you find that being the solution is just for somebody to say, listen, I'm stuck with this toxic boss and work culture, I need to leave? Is that the solution? Would you say majority of the time, half the time, only some of the time? I know there's different scenarios. I just wanted to get your thought on that.
Yeah. It's definitely some of the time,
Yeah.
right? Like you mentioned it, right? As like you're a new and congratulations on your new job. Sounds
Thank you.
amazing.
It's pretty great.
Um, yeah. Um, but that's part of it, right? And it's like ultimately the six bad boss types. Some of them, of course, like there's like the arrogant and violent boss or like the abusive narcissistic boss. Like these are bosses that are like directly abusive and potentially violent towards you,
Mm,
right? It's about 25% of people experience a boss like that.
mm,
So like think of like Gordon Ramsay on Hell's Kitchen where he's like throwing the plate on the ground and yelling at people, right? Those bosses, they're not going to change unless there's some like drastic moment in their life where they're forced to. And so if you work for somebody like that, quit. of
mm.
course, of course, like financially and all these other concerns, but like basically get your resume, go on, reach out to your network, like
Yeah.
create a plan to leave because that's ultimately what's going to help you a lot. Like there's an extent to the self work that you can do, but if you're under that kind of traumatic experience as a day to day,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. Like your experience on a day to day basis will sort of like override the ability for you to actually heal,
Mm.
because you're literally in the trauma. So just be aware of that, folks. But I mean, there are bosses that are not obviously the violent or abusive types. There's some that are called like messy bosses. Basically, they're not good at planning and scheduling. So they would just kick something and be like, hey, Ryan, um, can you work on, the slide show? And then I would just walk away. And like, I wouldn't tell you like, what am I looking for or when's it due? Or like, it would just be like, yeah, Ryan, you just do that, figure it out. And like, you know, that can be for some folks, if you're very like a SME expert and you like to like lead yourself and like do whatever, that can be empowering. Like I have clients that are like, I have a boss like that, but I love it because like I just want to go out and do my own thing.
Mm.
Great. Other folks, like let's say you're new to the company or you're new to the role, or maybe you're not quite sure about like how to navigate this stuff, that can be very disruptive because you're like, well, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Like the guy didn't tell me like,
Mm.
right? Like
Mm.
anything. He just said, do the slideshow, right? So it depends. Like a boss like that, you can actually work with a boss like that and say, hey, like, hey Rob, like I know you said the slideshow, but like, how long do you want it? When's it due? Like, what's the message you're hoping to communicate with this? Like, give me some more details.
Right.
And so it's not always like quitting's not always the answer. And also the other side is staying's not always the answer. It's very much, and this is where the free ebook actually helps you, is like it'll give you the six types and it'll tell you kind of like how to navigate each one. And then one is identify what type of boss you have. And then based on what type, there's different strategies for each. Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. I'm going to link that ebook into the show notes for people scroll down, go ahead and click on it because one time or another in your life, you're going to be dealing with a boss like that. And to understand how to communicate and how to handle that situation is going to work wonders for you. And like I said, we'll have you back on. We'll talk into further detail about the whole boss and toxic work culture situation. I've been there. I can relate and soak in the thousands of people listening to this. But I kind of just want to fast forward with your journey here a little bit. So you had reached out to me and you were telling me like how many different therapy sessions you've been to, how many different medications you've tried. You were literally
Mm-hmm.
going through everything. You've obviously mentioned the suicide attempt that thankfully was very unsuccessful. So it sounded like you were at basically the end of your rope and just not knowing what direction to take. You were looking for help, but you didn't know where to go. And
Mm-hmm.
you found the ketamine therapy. And I want to talk about that. Like when you found the ketamine therapy, what was your thought around that? Were you skeptical at all, or were you like, I need to try this. This is hopeful. And then literally talk to me about your process about finding the doctor, walking into the office, what it looks like, and perhaps like a trip or a vision or one of these appointments and how it helped you so people can kind of have an understanding of how this stuff works. Is, if they didn't listen to my conversation with Sunny or they're just very not well versed in psychedelics, they probably have no idea what we're talking about. They're probably thinking like the 70s, doing some drugs, seeing all this weird stuff or whatever. But that's not what it is. So I'm hoping you can kind of like shed some light on this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, what I mentioned to you was like I had my therapist. We were doing internal family systems and EMDR therapy. I knew she was good. I knew we were doing a lot of work,
Mhm.
and like we were clearing trauma. We were going back through my childhood and like doing all this stuff. And yet, I still felt like horrible in my day to day.
Mm.
And she actually, I think we were about 6 to 9 months in. Probably, yeah, we were about 9 months in, and I had literally scheduled her twice a week for 6 months. And like, it was like twice a week, but then probably about once every 2 weeks, I would reach out and be like, I literally want to kill myself. I need your help now. And
Wow.
like, so it was like 2 to 3 times a week for 6 months. And she said to me after about 9 months, she's like, Rob, like, I don't know why you're not feeling better. And she was like, you probably need to find a new therapist. And I was like, I know I don't need to find a new therapist. I see how good you are and I know what we're doing. And at that same kind of through that same period, I had gone to my regular GP, my regular doctor, and I had done, it was probably around 10 different types of meds again. And my doctor was like throwing darts at the wall. Like, I mean, I had done like Seroquel, which is like an antipsychotic. Um, and like, we'd done everything, like basically everything. And I had even given up on meds because that was the second bout of meds I went through. And it was like, I had done, I don't know, 10 to probably 15 to 20 by that point, where it was like, none of them really helped me. And like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Mm.
And like, I talked to my friend who actually, who actually referred me to IFS in the first place. And he was like, Rob, there's this stuff going around ketamine. Like, maybe you should try that. And I was like, well, I don't have a choice. Like, I was literally at that point looking at like the electroconvulsive therapy, like the one they shock your brain. And I was like, I don't feel good about that, but like, do I have a choice
Well,
at this point? And so I was like Googling ketamine clinics in Edmonton, and I found the one I go to, Envision Mind Care. And yeah, it was June 2021. I walked in. I got a referral from my regular GP, and I went to see the psychiatrist, and we did that intake form and stuff. And he just telling me, he was like, and the moment I was like, this guy, I like him and I trust him,
mm.
was in our first consult. This was before the ketamine. He was like, I have a genetic test for regular meds. Do you want to do it? In 2 weeks, like we'll do a cheek swab, and in 2 weeks, it'll tell you, like literally it'll be a form and it'll say like green, yellow, red for every medication out there. And he was like, yeah, next time you come back in, you can do it. I was like, I'm paying for it now. Let's go. And he pulled out like scientific papers about ketamine and like how it works and like how it's better and it'll like regrow your neurons and like this is like a very good thing. And I was like, well, I'm in, let's go. And yeah, we started June of 2021. It was twice a week for the first 4 weeks. And we were doing intranasal spray. So just like,
Okay.
yeah, just like a little bottle, like the nasal spray stuff. Um, and we started like really low dose. Like it was like, I think it was 60 or 80 milligrams nasal spray, which is like, you don't really feel much. Like you feel like you had maybe a couple beers.
Okay.
And even as we moved up, like I was expecting, like they're like, oh, it's psychedelic, blah blah blah,
You've been
and I was
floating around.
expecting
Yeah.
like, the the like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, like
Right.
all that stuff. And it was like literally the first 3 weeks, it was like the first 6 sessions. Nothing. Like I brought my Nintendo Switch actually after the first session because like I didn't feel anything. I was playing Mario on the Switch, and the people would come in and they would talk to me, and they were like surprised that I was like not, like some version of comatose.
Huh.
And I was like, I felt like I had like, you know, increasingly more beers, but I felt like I was just drunk. And then it would have been the last week where we went up to 160 milligrams intranasal. So just for folks out there, if you get the intramuscular injection or the IV ketamine, the absorption rates are like basically 100%, 95 plus percent. So you won't get 160 milligrams intranasal or intramuscular. You'll probably get somewhere around 100.
Okay.
Obviously, it depends on your weight and um, your doctor. Like the last time my doctor actually just switched to intramuscular, and last time I saw him, he gave me 70 milligrams um, as a intramuscular injection. For intranasal, your absorption rate is roughly can be a third. Obviously, it depends how you spray the bottle, and it's kind of annoying, but um, just so for folks out there, you kind of know.
Hmm.
But yeah, um, once we got to the fourth week, that's when it started becoming quote unquote psychedelic. And so, like, I would put headphones in. I got like the sleep eye mask, and like you kind of like lie there for about an hour. Like the trip lasts roughly 40 minutes ish.
Does it feel
And so
like
you're
40
like
minutes
taking it
or do you lose track of time?
a bit of both. Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes it feels like 40 minutes. Sometimes it feels like you just are in the pocket and like you just don't even there's no time, you're just there. Sometimes when you start to come out, like for me a lot, I'll just like snap up and be like, I'm awake now, let's go.
Wow. Okay.
Other times you're like, oh, I just want to stay in this longer because like this is good.
So what's that mean?
Yeah,
This is
it
good. I want
depends.
to, what makes it good? If you can explain to people like not necessarily how it works scientifically, but what makes it good? What is happening during those 40 minutes?
This is where it depends very much. So I've done ketamine 50 times now, roughly. Could be slightly less, could be slightly more. Um, but what the big part, actually, the big switch for me was when I had the regular prescription medication, was once my brain chemistry was actually like balanced,
Mm.
the ketamine sessions very much became future focused. Um, they became much more about who I was and who I could be. And like it wasn't dark anymore. Like before, because I suspect I had a lack of dopamine, it was very dark. It was very like aggressive and scary. And literally the last time I did it before I started meds, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. It was like the end of the first 4 weeks. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like that was pretty bad. And then I had that part of me that was like, no, you just gotta, do one more time and see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but but I mean, basically, what happens is, I mean, two things can kind of happen. One is your brain can go back to those childhood traumas, and because you don't actually like, it's like ketamine is a dissociative.
Hmm.
So like, I don't know, for folks out there, like they invented it as like a anesthetic, and then they still use it. So like veterinarians use it when they do like surgeries on animals and stuff. But you kind of can see those events for what they are and not what you experienced. And so if you also do like your own mindset work, you can actually like, heal those events without um yeah, without pain. So
Mm.
like, like I saw some childhood stuff, or I saw like, some stuff around when I was suicidal, and it was like, oh, I could just go in now and like help myself, my past self, out of those situations and give them empathy and compassion without it this being this like catastrophic, like very intense moment, which in
Mm.
therapy, when you're not on meds, it can feel like very intense. And then the
This
other stuff was like this. Yeah, go ahead.
this is super interesting. If you
Yeah.
don't mind me asking, I want to dig slightly deeper. Is like, so
Yeah.
when you saw yourself as a child, were you like seeing yourself as a child? This is a terrible comparison, but I'm thinking of like Scrooge gets brought back to look at like what is it, like back in the day or whatever. Like, are you viewing yourself as a kid? Are you mentally there? Like, what does that look like when under ketamine and you're seeing your childhood trauma?
Yeah. You see yourself going
Yeah.
through these experiences.
Wow.
Of course, this was my experience. So I had already done internal family systems therapy, which is you do that visualization work kind of as part of it, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
at least. And
Mm-hmm.
even in EMDR, like you will imagine these events and then you will like work through them. So like this was already something like I had at that point I had done 200-ish therapy sessions. So this was like part of like what my brain was already trained to do.
Gotcha.
And so
Okay.
like this was a safe way to actually go into those things without feeling like Sunny. If you listen to Sunny's episode a few 2 weeks ago, like it has no, your protectors become offline. So there's no defense going like, Rob, this is unsafe, or you shouldn't go here because what happens if your whole system explodes. Like those things are sort of like offline, and so you can go into these moments feeling like neutral at
Mm.
least about them, or feeling like you are this person and like you can see yourself, and it's not like you're experiencing that moment. You're just sort of like looking at it like kind of like, for me it was like you're floating in a way,
Mm.
but you see it like watching a movie, and you're like, oh, I can just like take my child self out of this and they don't need to experience this anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff. Um, are you still doing ketamine, or does there come a point where it's like it served its purpose? I'm good to go from now on, or what's your process with that?
I'm sure there are folks that let it go, right? um, I think for me, I have treatment resistant depression. And so I notice when I don't have ketamine roughly every 4 to 6 weeks,
Mm.
I feel those like mental inflexibility coming back. And so I like to do it ideally every 4 weeks. Obviously, since I moved to Costa Rica, that's been not possible. But like next week, I'm going to see Sunny and I'm going to do some ketamine with her. And like when I do also go back to Edmonton periodically, to do ketamine and also to get my meds refilled.
Mm.
But like when I did that retreat with Sunny in Santa Cruz, like some of those folks, I think they probably just did it, at that retreat, or maybe they'll go a couple times a year and do it. But it's not like a treatment thing like it is for me.
Mm. I want to hit on something. I don't know if you've been asked this before, but I'm really curious to know. Marrying a partner that was good for me, that supported me and my passions and everything I was going through was a really big boost to me personally. Um, can I imagine the same for you? Like, how important was it to find your now wife and the support that she gives you? Would you, can I assume that you would not have been able to find her and her support has you not found this help with the treatment that you were providing?
So my wife has been through almost all of it. So I met
Wow.
her in 2014. So
Okay, I didn't know
this would
that.
have
Wow.
been roughly, yeah, roughly a year after the suicide attempt. I met her. And yeah, we started dating like, well, I mean, we met on Tinder. So like our first date was a date,
Right, right.
but we were dating right away. And she was with me through the parts of like complete dissociation. Then she was with me through the like opening up the trauma, and like she she has very strong, um I guess, like taking care of you parts,
Hmm.
or like caretaking parts, I guess is a better word. And so like she was there for me so much that like it's unbelievable. And as I started to heal, like of course our relationship's very different now than it was, but she's also seen me heal, and so that led her to her own journey of going on healing.
Mm.
And so it's been very much growth together, as like I've healed and then she's going as well. And I think my therapist, she does couples therapy, and she said to me, Rob, she's like, you have to be very aware that like if one of you heals, because your parts kind of change, the relationship will change.
Mm.
And so you need to be aware of this. And then the other side of it is if she goes on her healing journey, again, your relationship's going to change, and you just have to be aware of it. It's not
Mm.
that it's good or bad. It's just like what I know, like the media says, like what is it? You like the opposite of you, or whatever that is.
Opposites
But it
attract, yeah.
was that. Yeah, it was like I needed help, and she was a caretaker. And it was like, boom.
Mm.
But then the thing is, it's like, if I heal and I don't need a caretaker, then what happens if she feels like, well, who do I take care of now? And
Yeah.
that's where a lot of it becomes these breakups. But because she went on her journey as well, it's like, no, we're right for each other, and now we're just evolving.
That makes complete sense. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
I asked that question because I don't think people realize the importance of choosing a partner that's right for you and what you're going through. That definitely includes mental health. That includes, your values and obviously finances and the lifestyle you're looking for and traveling and all that. So was genuinely curious about choosing your partner and how that helped and supported you to become a better you. And I think it's awesome in turn, you've helped her become a better her. And that's great. What you just said about like she almost achieved her goal and helping you get better reminds me of you earlier in this podcast saying you achieved, you got the job, you were a national champion. Now what? Right. So she would have been basically in your boat but from a different perspective. But she got the help that she needed that you just said. So your relationship continued to grow. That's awesome. I love hearing that.
And that's like, Ryan, what you picked up on is exactly what we talk about in IFS, right? Is these parts that are cultivated that lead the system. Mine is the high achiever.
Mm,
Hers is the caretaker. There
mm,
are folks that are like the people pleaser, or the hyper logical, or the hyper intelligent, or the hyper controller, or the risk averse. Like there are many parts that, and also for folks out there, you can have all of them. So you can have all of them, and they come in at different points in your time in your day, because you know something happens that was out of your control, so your controller swoops in. Or
mm,
like, your boss says, hey Ryan, you should have, like, you were late on this project, so your hyperachiever comes in, right? So you can have all of these parts, and many that I haven't listed, of course,
mm,
and they come in at different points. But as you work with yourself and you start to realize that, like, me as self, I can lead the system in the best way possible. That's when those parts trust you enough to chill out. And you can still use them, right? Like when I was preparing for TED, I was like, I need my overachiever. Why? Because I got to do a lot of work.
Hmm.
But then it's like, okay, when I'm actually going on the stage, I'm like, hey, overachiever, I need you to take a break because I need to show up as me. And so it's like, it's not that you're trying to kill them off or kill the ego or whatever, right? It's like, and it's also the other side is like, this ain't going to make you soft. If you, like a lot of my folks, they're like, yeah, if I do this work, like, does this mean I'm never going to achieve it? And you're like, no, not at all. Right. And so it's like, it's just be cultivating that internal relationship with all these parts. So then you can show up, you can literally lead them as like a team,
Mm.
get the best results for you. And it'll allow you so you to do these things that you've always wanted to do or who you are without the, oh, you should do this or you should do that. It's like, no, you know what? I want to do it because I
Mm.
think it's cool or I think it's fun.
That's awesome. This sounds like the pinnacle of self-awareness. It's funny you're saying this because I'm not kidding. A couple of days ago, my wife and I were driving on the road and then in a parking lot, Target. So you can imagine how freaking cluttered that is. And people were in my lane, people were just cutting me off and tailgating me. And I'm like, what is going on? And I looked at her and I said, Kristen, I was like, self-awareness is the most attractive thing that anybody can ever have because so many people lack it. It drives me insane. And like to hear you talking about like pulling different levers that you have at different moments, I feel like is just like I said, it's the pinnacle. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a good moment to like let people know like how to work with you and pull those levers and how to find that in themselves. I honestly think this is a great point to pub where people can work with you and find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. First, I mean, thank you. The other side of it is like, you're right. But also, it's funny. It's like self awareness is like driving. Like everybody thinks they're a great driver. Like literally, the research says that 95% of people think they're self aware, and only 12 to 15% actually are.
Oh God.
Um, so that's another. If folks want to read that book, it's called Insight by Dr. Tasha Urich. But totally recommend it. And also on her website, I think it's insightbook.com. There's a free self-awareness quiz.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
it's actually really cool. So one is you take it, yeah, yeah. One of you takes it, you take it about yourself, and then like for you, Ryan, like you would have your wife take it about you, and then it like sends you
Oh,
results
I'm
afterwards.
doing this. I'm
Um,
doing this. It's
yeah,
awesome.
definitely do it.
That's great.
But yeah, for me, I mean, the big thing, and folks, if you're out there and you're like, hey, I want to start tuning in, I have a 3-minute meditation. If you just send me an email, rob@elitehighperformance.com, I'll send it to you for free. Like, don't,
Awesome.
yeah. So you can, that'll help you just check in with yourself, just how you're feeling. And like 3 minutes doesn't take too long. You can use it whenever you want. I would totally recommend you use it when you feel those, we call them red flag feelings, but like fear, anxiety, stress, anger, those kind of moments.
Mhm.
But even just like habit building, like if you want to do it at like 9 a.m. every morning, it's also good.
Mm.
Yeah, and if you want to work with me, one is we have group programs, so you can have that or like on demand stuff. But if you want to work with me one on one, yeah, just reach out, rob@elitehighperformance.com. Just send me an email, and I'll tell you what, I'll give the first 5 folks who reach out to me a free one-on-one session. So if you
Ooh.
send me an email, I will give you 1 hour. I won't I won't sell you on stuff. I promise. I will literally try to help you as best as I can in that hour. And Ryan, if you'd like, I'll give you a free session as well. If you'd like to take me up on that,
Yeah.
let me
What?
know what
Hell
you want.
yeah. Hell yeah. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
genuinely appreciate that. People, you better take them up on this. This is awesome. I've never had that on the podcast, so I genuinely appreciate that. Um, Rob, this has been awesome. Like I said, I appreciate you taking the step to reach out, but I also appreciate you being honest and vulnerable because I think that's how you're going to connect to people. You probably felt alone throughout your journey, but you probably realize now you're definitely not alone. There's a ton of people listening to this that are going to feel exactly how you felt or close to it. And so, you giving them somewhat of a blueprint or perhaps some different ways out of their situation is beyond helpful. Even if one
Thank you.
person listened to this and you changed their life, like it did its job. So, I appreciate you diving deeper and going beyond just the surface and talking about your most vulnerable experiences and how therapy and ketamine has changed your life and how working on yourself has changed your life. Um, and like I said, I want to have you back on. We could dive deeper in any of this, but I also definitely really want to have you back on to talk more about like the work culture and the toxic bosses and stuff because man, oh man, that is something we've all dealt with. And if you haven't, it's probably coming at some point or another. And if it doesn't, consider yourself lucky. That's wonderful. Um, so Rob, like, I want to say thank you so much again. Happy 2024. I'm going to take this conversation with me. I'm going to re-listen to this again, especially as I become a dad. I'm going to check back in just to make sure I'm taking some great advice of yours. And, I can't fix or control everything, but I'm doing the best that I can. So appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And if I could give anything to folks, is it's that it's wait. Don't wait for that moment where you have to do it or you're going to die, or don't wait for that moment where it's like you're burnt out and you like literally need 6 months off of work, or don't wait for that moment where you're like, man, like I just like I'm one thing away from quitting my job.
Mm,
Like reach out. Doesn't matter if you reach out to me or whoever, right? Like Sonny's great, or the legendary Tommy.
yeah, Tommy
Tommy, he's
Breedlove.
great.
Yeah,
Right? I've never met him, but I'm a huge
he's
fan.
great. Yeah.
Right? And it's like reach out to folks. Like that's like take action, because and I know it's hard, and I know it takes a lot of courage, and I know it takes, a lot of time and investment and energy, and but the results speak for themselves,
Mm,
right? It's like, and it's not even about like, oh well, you're going to get more money, which you will, or it's not about, oh well, you'll be whatever, more successful. It's like literally your life will change. You'll feel more fulfilled. You'll feel less of this, like this, basically this like desire to like keep doing, or like that, that I'm just punching the clock. Like
mm,
this kind of like what you mentioned, like I should be doing something better, but I'm just here to like punch the clock.
mhm,
And it's like you don't have to feel that way. And it's not unachievable for you to take the steps to create that life you want to live. And I know it's like corny and kind of like lame for like someone like me to say that, but it's like I can't not say it because like I've experienced it.
yeah,
So
that's huge.
it's do the work, and the work works.
Love it. You live one life, right? Just put in the work, be as happy as you possibly can. I try not to live life with having any regrets. So if there's a voice in my mind thinking I could be doing something else or I'd be happier if I did X, Y, Z, then it's up to me to figure out how to make that happen. Um, you're the best, Rob. I really genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon.